Fala galera, tudo bem? Eu sou o Erasmo Agostinho e você está no Agostinho Talk. Aqui a gente conversa com músicos de verdade e sabe histórias de bastidores incríveis. Se você já gosta desse conteúdo, já vai se inscrevendo, compartilhando aí no Instagram, no YouTube, beleza galera? Então vamos para a nossa entrevista. Hoje vamos entrevistar Tommy Mandel, tecladista do Bryan e do Dire Straits. Mas nossa entrevista vai ser diferente, vai ser uma entrevista à la carte, porque Tommy gravou em dias diferentes, em momentos diferentes. E vocês acompanharão a seguir essas gravações onde ele conta sobre suas experiências de carreira. Fica comigo! Nesse vídeo, Tommy manda uma mensagem para os fãs do Brasil e também fala sobre o show Alchemy, do Dire Straits.
Hey, it's Tommy Mandel talking to all of our fans in Brazil and Portugal. Just telling you that it was really fun being a part of Dire Straits, being on Alchemy. Yeah, it seems to withhold test of time. It was Mark's baby. He organized the whole thing. Everyone else in the band, really great guys. And I'm really happy that it's still being heard and talked about.
Nesse outro vídeo, Tommy fala qual foi a música mais difícil de ser tocada no show Alchemy, do Dire Straits.
Eraldo wanted to know what was the hardest material to play in the Alchemy World Tour. The answer that I have for him and for you, my many fabulous fans, is Private Investigations, because it had a run in the left hand that I had to do a diminished scale or perhaps a half diminished scale, but it wasn't really a diminished scale either. But Mark invented it with Alan on the synclavier cellos, probably. Yeah, cellos. And while I was doing that in my left hand, I had to play, that was on the synclavier. In the right hand, I had to play chords going down on one of the other keyboards. So it was a bit of a practice situation. We musicians always say practice makes perfect. We also say there's no such thing as perfect. Ha ha ha. So it's still good to practice, even if it's not going to be perfect. And the more I played it, the better I could do it. And I can still do it now. And I do it at some gigs, sometimes. So Private Investigations. Another one that took a little bit of practice, but was easy in the end, was Industrial Disease. That had that cool organ part that for the next record, after I wasn't playing with them anymore, Mark kind of adapted to be Walk of Life. Same kind of sound. It's a harken back to the early 60s, kind of mid 60s combo organs before guys started getting back into the Hammond. Anyway, that took some practice because it was a two-handed thing, but I loved it. It was from my childhood, that style. And in the end, it was not garbage. It was beauty.
Nesse outro vídeo, Tommy comenta sobre os artistas com quem trabalhou, além de dar detalhes sobre os equipamentos.
Hey, Eraldo and all your friends. It's Tommy Mandel. How you doing? Anyway, you had some questions, so I got some answers. Anyway, let's move over to the piano, because I know you guys like Dire Straits and the piano and stuff like that. So let's do some question answering. Okay, so the question was that you wanted to know how did my different the gigs that I've had over the years, how do the bosses different one from the other? Like how is working for Mark
Knopfler, different than working for Bryan Adams, and working for John Waite, and working for Cyndi Lauper. There's a whole lot of these guys out there, you know, and for some reason, there was a time when they all wanted me to play for them, so I got very lucky. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot from Mark and John in Dire Straits. It was really a good time. I started off, my first big gig was with Ian Hunter from Montehoople and Mick Ronson, who made a name for himself in David Bowie, but he was just a fabulous musician guy on his own. And they were really cool. I was about 10 years younger than Ian, and Mick was somewhere in the middle. But so I was one of the young guys in the band. There were a lot of young guys in that band. It was 1979, 80, and 81, and we did Welcome to the Club. We did a world tour supporting You're Never Alone with Schizophrenic album. And so Ian pretty much had his ideas what he wanted, but he let me go free. He let me do a lot of stuff that he hadn't thought of, because they wanted young guys in the band for new ideas, but there was a certain kind of, you know, like it had to rock like. So as long as it rocked, you know, it was pretty much okay. But it, you know, there were, once I got yelled at because I was doing some weird sounds during the show that it wasn't on purpose, but I think they thought it was on purpose. It's hard to control these things sometimes, you know, when you're in the moment. But anyway, so that was a very free environment. It was great. And I got to do a lot of piano and a lot of synthesizer. I had like a Hammond and clavinet. And I bought a Krumar DS2. Ian's Mini Moog was there. And then Ian had this really cool Yamaha YC30 organ. It was sort of like a Vox organ, but it had more drawbars like a Hammond, but it was kind of, it had its own sound. And I played it through this, it wasn't a whole Leslie, it was just like the rotor part of a Leslie. It was called a Rotovibe or something, I forget. But you'd hook it up to the back of a twin reverb. So it was just really, it stayed out of the way of the other instruments. It was really cool. And then some songs I'd go to the other side of the stage and play the piano on. Oh yeah, and there was a string, Selena string synth too. Anyway, after Ian, I started working for Bryan Adams, and I'm leaving a couple of good guys out, like David Johansen and Sylvain, who were both really good. David wanted rock, you know, rootsy, and Sylvain let me pretty much do what I wanted. Sylvain was a good keyboard player too, but he was playing guitar in that band. We had a girl drummer, Rosie Rex, who was really good, and Danny Reed was from the bass player from New Orleans. That was Sylvain and the Teardrops, or Syl and the Teardrops. It was a good album, Power Station. And so he you know, he liked what I did, so there was never an issue about that. And as long as we kept it moving, yeah, that was the main thing, is, you know, you have to rock. But then by the time I got into Dire Straits, because Alan basically needed a third and a fourth hand, you know? So that Alan and Mark were more specific about the parts they wanted. They had everything worked out. So that was a little different than some of the other gigs, in that it was 7 guys in the band, and figure out, originally it was just a quartet with no keyboards. So everything had to be organized. So that was different, but I still learned a really lot, and there was a certain kind of subtle sophistication that they had that was different than the other acts. So that was cool. And then after that, I worked for John Waite, I'm Not Missing You,
And he was very free. Like anything I wanted to do, he was into it, you know. And Earl Slick was the guitar player the first year, and the second year was John McCurry, and Frankie LaRocca played drums, Alan Childs, Carmine Rojas was in one band, Joe Vassler was in the other. So those 2 John Waite years were really good too, and John was a really cool guy, smart guy, you know, and he just liked to have fun, you know. And we all liked that. That's the really lucky thing about the career, was that, you know, it was fun. Thank heavens for that. And then after that, I did some work with Little Steven and the Disciples of Soul. He was very cool. He really never seemed to get rattled, and it had to be funky and rock at the same time. And Steve Jordan was the drummer and T.M. Stevens was the bass, so we had a really good band. And then Peter Wolf, I did a record with Peter Wolf from Jay Giles, his second solo record. He was very cool too. He was very intense, and he really wanted it to swing. He would practice like James Brown. Before we'd start recording, we'd be in the studio. We'd get there, and Bobby Chouinard, the drummer, would go lie down on a couch because he had been like partying the night before. Bobby Chouinard was like known as one of the best drummers and also one of the biggest partiers. He was from Boston, so the fact that he was playing with Pete Wolf from Jay Giles, who was one of his idol groups, he was really into it and totally cool. But the one night he got a full night's sleep before he came to the session, he didn't play as good. He had to have been sort of out there rollicking the night before. But anyway, so we'd get in the studio, but before we'd start recording the tune, we'd all go into the studio room, and Steve would make like, all right, it's the fabulous Blue Flame Lounge, and he'd pretend he was James Brown, and we were all the band, and we'd just have this like 15-minute soul jam, and E.T., the really cool producer friend and engineer that was in the control room, he wouldn't even tape it, not that I know of. I mean, I don't know, maybe he did, but we'd just get all warmed up. So by the time it got time to do Peter's music, we all were in an R&B state of mind and kind of warm. So that was fun with him. But he really worked very hard, and he had a personal trainer then. Pete Wolf, one of my favorite guys, really sweet guy, very intense and very serious, but fun too. And he knew everything. He like knows every record ever made. He's like a musicologist without really having a name to it. So after that, the only guy I haven't really talked about, I guess, is Richie Sambora. After I worked with Bryan Adams, I did 2 quick tours with Richie Sambora. It was a great band. Kazim Sultan was a bass player and singer. Ron Wixow was the drummer, and Everett Bradley and Joya DiCarlo were, I think that's her last name, were the percussionists, backup singers. Richie Supa wrote a lot of those songs. And I had to do the parts that Billy Preston had done on the album, Richie's second solo album. And it was beautiful music, and Richie was a prince. Great guy, very generous, great singer, great player, good writer. And I got to meet Heather Locklear, his wife, and they just had the baby, but I don't think I saw the baby. And that was really fun. With Richie, it was like we were all there because by then it was 1998. You know, we'd all kind of proved ourselves. So you just did, you did what you did. He gave me a really good roadie, Marty Gelhar, who got all the sounds really nice and worked with me on the sounds. We played. There's some good bootlegs of Tokyo. Like one night with Richie, we're on the road and we're getting ready to do the encore, and we're all just sort of huddled in a group, and they're all cheering out there. And so he goes, well, what should we play? And so someone said, maybe it was even me, I don't know. I said, how about Abbey Road Side 2? And they were like, do you know it? Do you know it? Do you know it? Yeah. So we got up there and we just started playing through a lot of it, and it was fun. So the difference between that experience and in Dire Straits, when everything, it's sort of like the difference between if you're in a palace, like Dire Straits was like a palace, and you're about to meet the king. We did get to meet Prince Charles, now King Charles, and Lady Di, and they were cool. Prince Charles was really nice to me. They were good. But then with Richie, it was different. It was like somehow we were kids, and we had taken the family car, you know, without really asking Dad and Mom for the keys. And we'd gone to like, I don't know, not a McDonald's, but someplace cool. And we were just having a good time, not getting hurt. And it was like, by then we were the grown-ups, you know, but we were still could act like kids, you know, and like decide in the middle of an encore in front of like 10 or 20,000 screaming Japanese people, fuck, let's just do this, you know, what we did what we wanted, you know. So the difference between those experiences was significant, but there, you know, life is all different kinds of things. And Bryan Adams, who I probably was on the road the longest for, I did about 10 years of recording with him in the studio, and eventually, after Dire Straits and after John Waite, Bryan was really big, so it just seemed like the right thing to do to go and play live with him instead of being just in the studio. So I joined up the guys we'd been making the records since '81, and then I was like, for 10 years I was on the road with him too and doing some recording, but Bryan was, he kind of liked what we did. That's why we were in the band. And by the time I joined, I was the last guy to join, and we were all his ideal people. Like, we were the guys that he had in his focused mind. Back from 1981, he wanted to put the best band together. And when I joined in '88, that was the last guy. So all the pieces were there. So we did like about 10 years on the road. And, you know, there were times when I had to find out what he wanted, especially when Mutt Lange started producing. Mutt came to one sound check and actually sang me all the parts till thought I died and gone to heaven. And I learned them and played them, you know. Mutt Lange was a pretty cool guy too, and very talented, very different. But a lot of times with Bryan, especially near the beginning, I got to do kind of whatever came into my hands, because those were the parts that I had played on the records. And that was a lot of fun. It was like just 5 of us, like in the studio too. It wasn't like all these overdubs or anything. It wasn't like Dire Straits maybe it was like early Dire Straits before we were in the group, when it was just like Mark and Pick and David and John. You know, maybe they just played stuff that out of their hearts, I don't know. But by the time I got to Dire Straits, it was very sort of thought out and premeditated. But with Bryan, we got to be it was sort of in the middle. You know, the parts had to be steady and they had to be the same every night, pretty much. There was a little more freedom than Dire Straits. So those are all the different groups that I played for. I never played live with Cyndi Lauper. She came over here to this place to do some recording. Then I met her in the studio one night and played on one of her records. I was asked to go on the road with her, but it just didn't seem like the right thing at the right time for me. And I did do a lot of gigs with Bo Diddley, you know, Bo Diddley, like... I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do. In the house next door. He was like this really, a little bit older, you know, because he had made records, I think, starting in the 50s. He was a sheriff down in his hometown in Florida. Just a great guy. And he wrote some real classic. Who Do You Love, I think he wrote. Don't quote me on that. He might have wrote that. I think he did, but that might have been Howlin' Wolf. I think it was him. And he had this guitar that was shaped like a box. I see, with him, I had so much respect because he was one of my childhood heroes. Not like Mark, who was same age as me. I mean, we were both born in the same year. Matter of fact, at one sound check, I started playing, Dire Straits sound check, I started playing it's a Everly Brothers song called Crying in the Rain. Turns out it actually was written by Carole King, but we didn't know that at the time when we were kids. But it was just, and so Mark was like, how do you know that song? And I'm like, what do you mean, how do I know that song? I don't think Mark thought of anybody as his equal. Now, if I had to say one bad thing about Mark, well, Chet Atkins. Like Mark, you know, he was like a visionary, so it's hard to be a visionary, you know, but if you're working with a visionary, it can be, you know, a little bit humbling, but it's good to be humbled, right? Anyway, I wouldn't have I wouldn't change anything that happened to me for the world. Even though it looks like that I don't have a neck from this angle. I do have a neck. I have a pretty long neck, actually. Let me see if I can show you my neck. Trouble is, when I show you my neck, the rest of me doesn't look so good. Anyway, thanks, Eraldo, for this opportunity. Bye.
Nesse vídeo, Tommy responde a nossa pergunta: por que ele parecia tocar percussão no show Alchemy, na música Sultans of Swing? E também se ele ainda tem contato com ex-integrantes da banda. E no final, ainda fala sobre o Dire Straits Legacy.
Yo, it's Tommy Mandel here again with one last bit of information. They turned the lights off. Anyway, what was I playing during Sultans of Swing before the keyboard parts came in near the end of the song? It looked like I was playing a percussion instrument. Well, I was pretending to play a percussion instrument. It may have been in the mix, but I seriously doubt it. But it felt better than just standing there. So I jumped around and pretended that my Korg CX3 Hammond organ clone was two conga drums. So that's what I was playing percussion on. But I think the only person that could hear that was me. So I have to tell you, I was great. And the last question, I think I may have already answered in one of the other clips, but I am in touch with Alan Clark and Phil Palmer and Danny Cummins and Mel Collins. Not every day or every week. You know, I'm in touch with Bryan Adams too, and Keith and Mickey, and Ian Hunter. It's great to stay, you know, in touch with guys that you played with in the old days, because you get a bond from playing in a band. And we did do those two Dire Straits Legacy tours when Premiano DiBiase couldn't come to the States, or I think he had another gig, another tour booked then. And so Alan called me, and I met Phil and Marco Caviglia, who was a student of Mark Knopfler's work, and did a pretty good job in this. It wasn't really a tribute band, because we were all in the group at one point, but none of the originals were in. So it was sort of like a paradoxical kind of, is it a cover band or is it the band? It was really neither. But anyway, it was fun, and we did 3 weeks in the summer in the States, and it was great hanging out and playing the old songs and getting on a tour bus again, which is something I hadn't done in quite a while. Bye.
Que bom que você ficou até aqui. Agora me diz aí, de que país você está assistindo o Agostinho's Music? De que estado? E também me diga uma coisa, em que ano você está assistindo esse vídeo? E olha só, não esquece de hypar, hein? Hypa o vídeo!